Okay, Justin. So we just did a couple weeks of episodes talking about financial advice at different age levels for people in their 20s and their 30s. Now we're on to 40s, and that's our generation, right?
So I'm going to learn something today.
Hey, we're still figuring it out as we go along, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I was
I
saying separately by email, there's some of us doing the 40s, right? Like you've got a family, kids, and me living the bachelor life in my 40s. But
Mhm.
there's financially there's some similarities I think among many of us. And we are talking about now the millennial generation is entering their 40s. The very oldest millennials are 43, like me.
what part of 1980 was the actual cutoff? But
Is it July
yeah,
1980? I think it's not. I think it's
yeah.
January 1st, 1981 is the cutoff.
No Gen Xer is going to call me a Gen Xer, and the youngest millennials think I'm an old guy. Yeah, for sure, boomer, right? But yeah,
Are we the sandwich generation now? Like that used to be
uh,
applied to Gen Xers. I guess that's us now,
yeah,
right?
I think so. I mean, if I think about it, on a personal standpoint, I've extended family who have gone through health issues just recently, and
Yep.
not only them, but like friends and colleagues as well of the similar age. And I know yourself, you had a personal um, dealings with your mother, and so and you have your father still to kind of be with and work with and help support as well. And so yeah, very much so. I have aging parents as well, and it's never far from conversation
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
far from mind. So in that sense, yeah, I think we're very much in a situation where now we are going to be potentially expected to not only look at those maybe who are in a younger generation, but also yeah, in that older cohort. So it's a challenge, and it's something that people really reach for, but it's a new experience in a lot of ways for people.
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, if you're thinking about it, most of us in our 40s, we probably have parents in their late 60s to 70s, possibly late 70s. And through them, I guess we're kind of starting to learn there is maybe this is part of the midlife crisis thing going on too. Is we're starting to learn there is a limit to life and there is a limit to our
Yeah,
health.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and that's something I mentioned I think in the blog post as well. And what I wanted to talk about today too is in terms of financial planning beyond just looking to make sure you have enough money for your retirement and then worrying about not running out of money when you are retired. The other thing to plan for is having enough health for retirement. And now anything can happen. You alluded to my mother. She passed away last year at 73. That was
Mhm.
the first time I'm mentioning this on this podcast, but there are some learnings from that. And we might delve a little bit deeper into estate planning stuff and so on later. But she was a pretty healthy person. There was no reason she shouldn't have made it past that age, but things
Mhm.
happen very, very suddenly, especially where cancer is related. And I hear that a lot through clients. I've had a number of clients who died well before they probably should have, and they lived healthy lives. It's just it happens,
Mhm.
and yeah. So we're
It's
seeing mortality of our parents' generation. We are kind of thinking ourselves like I just turned 40 like yesterday, right? And I'm almost 44. You're 44 next month, right? But
yeah, as you reminded me, as my kids remind
yep,
me, yeah. Um, the funny thing, I was just thinking, I did the math, and like I know, like people are getting having children later in life these days,
mhm,
right? And you know, the sandwich generation, as the phrase is loosely used, may actually be in the 30s now, in the near future, right? Because
maybe yeah,
of just the age of marriage or or children and things like that is increasing. So it's just something to think about for down the road for people. You might not have to have to be in your 40s before you start thinking about some of these issues. You may be in your 20s or
yeah,
30s, and no. And those conversations again, you talk about like estate planning and planning and just they're not easy conversations by for anybody, right? And but bringing them up and just to try to ensure and hey mom, hey dad, hey grandma, grandpa, you know, not to be crude about it, but like these are not over Thanksgiving perhaps, or they but have you got that updated? Have you thought about it? Don't worry about us or rejig that thing, right? Because
yep, yep.
um
and this is something I mentioned in the blog post too. If you're in your 40s, especially if you have kids and you don't have a will in place, stop everything right now. Do something. Very minimum, write something down on paper, a holograph will. Write the whole thing by hand and sign it. But really, you should be getting a proper will done because you probably have a decent amount of assets. You've got your kids to consider as well. What if both you and your spouse pass away? Who looks after them? The province will decide. If you don't have it written down, the province will decide. And might not be the person you want to look after them. And in terms of your money, that too. Someone like myself, not married, if I die without a will, and I have a holograph will myself, I should probably get that done more officially. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite there, but at least I have that holograph will. If I died without a will, which is called dying intestate, all my money flows to my father. My father's a resident of BC, where they have high probate fees, and not to mention just, accumulating my net worth with his net worth before it passes on to my sister, which is where I intend for it to go to. It's going to go through a level of both probate fees as well as additional taxation and whatnot. That's not ideal. And that's just has to do with Alberta estates succession or whatever. It is that, when someone does not have a spouse and family, it goes up a generation instead of sideways. I don't know if it's like that in every province, but that's Alberta. That's been my experience. I had a client who died without a will, without spouse or family, and it went to his parents. But yeah, health, like I was mentioning this earlier, that is something we can plan around. And when you're in your 40s, if you're living a lifestyle that's maybe not perfect health-wise, and you start to see that with your parents' generation, if you're seeing them slow down, or we see it a lot with our clients. We have a huge range of clients. Some living super healthy, and they're healthy and active in their 90s, and then some who are really struggling through their 60s. Makes you think. What can I do today to be a little healthier? Do those regular checkups. I went through almost my entire 30s without seeing a doctor at all. I just didn't get sick, or nothing major.
You're invincible.
Didn't go to a Medi-Center or anything like that until I finally sought out a doctor. I know they're hard to find in Alberta, but find a doctor, do regular checkups, get those blood tests done at least. The minimal stuff.
One thing I'll say as well is that, health. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm going to go walk, I'm going to do this, I'm going to exercise more. I want to make sure I'm healthy so I can, play with my kids when they get older, or maybe, with the grandkids as they get older as well, right? And so it is there. I'll give you just a challenge right off the bat, because I know that our phones all have our the stock apps, the financial apps, and everyone likes checking the numbers every day, if or more, multiple times a day. I would say here's an open challenge. Every time you look at your watch list or your portfolio, I want you to drop down to the ground to do 10 push-ups, right? And just something. Just
one has to go down, the other has to go up. You check your portfolio less, exercise more.
Yeah, or if you're gonna do it, make sure you do both. Yeah. So at least you're getting some physical benefit too, and you can mutter while you're doing your push-ups or something or what have you. But it'll just give a catalyst. Just for all the time that you think about doing one thing, staring at the phone, looking at a number or a graph, spend a little bit of time potentially, and because again I'll bring it up now because since I'm thinking about it, is that I think the most precious thing right now I've come to realize in my life situation in my 40s as it stands is the time. There's the work environment and the requisite resources required for that, but then also driving kids to programming, right, and doing things on the weekend, birthday parties, just so many things that pull at you. Prioritizing your time and doing that, and then maybe having some additional resources and subject matter experts to help you with some of the things like your health, like your finances, your planning, your medical, whatever, what have you, right? Focus that time, and because that's, I find, between your parents, your kids, your spouse, your partner, whatever, your activities, your career, you have even less time now than I found in my 30s, right?
Yeah,
it's
time
so busy.
Time is hard to find, and habits are hard to form. And we talk about this investing wise too, is how hard it is to create that habit of saving monthly and spending wisely and so forth. Wise, I mean, I want case in point. I planned to work out yesterday, but then I had tacos for dinner and a beer with it, and I didn't feel like the hockey game with me. I want to watch the hockey game, even though we got blown out. Season opener, Oilers against Winnipeg.
Yes, I watched
and
the
then
whole
I ended
game.
up not working out. I will say one bit of advice, and we'll move on from this, but a
Yeah.
bit of advice in terms of habit forming is the gamification of physical activity is wonderful. One having like a watch tracking your steps and
Yeah.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
trying to hit that level each day. Um,
A lot of things in our lives are sort of gamified in some ways too, right? And for better or for worse. But if you think that it's an additional tool to change or to build a behavior, absolutely. Why not? Right?
one, one last thing, then we'll talk finance stuff again.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this, the credit to where I got this idea from. It was from Mark McGrath on one of the Rational
Mm-hmm.
Reminder podcasts. He talked about this. He's using MetaQuest. So the MetaQuest 3 is the latest VR headset from Meta.
Mm-hmm.
And that is keeping him active. And that has some fun games, keeps you active. Yep. Boxing and
Run like a gorilla. Yeah.
got one where you basically slash zombies with a sword and it keeps you active. It tracks your active minutes. Do like 30 minutes, 45 minutes a day or something like that, just to stay relatively active. For myself, and I started, I guess earlier this year, around February, March, I got my MetaQuest 3 and started doing pretty regular sort of boxing sessions, 30 minutes a day.
Yeah.
My blood pressure down from borderline too high to I actually surprised my doctor and he checked it twice when I was in for a check. And I was at a dangerous level, blood pressure wise. Really excellent presentation at my Rotary Club a few months ago from a professor in the study of heart health, just doing about 30 minutes a day. And he said 20 something minutes, but let's round it up to 30 minutes. 30 minutes a day of any type of activity, just walking, doing something active, can actually have profound effects on your health. And he looked at the oxygenation levels in blood of people in different age groups and over time and so forth. And people who live less healthy lifestyles, like I have in the past, they're on a different trajectory, really. If you're healthy, you might stay like this through your life. If you're unhealthy, it's going slanted down a bit more. You're on a different trajectory. But just shifting from non-activity to doing some daily activity, it shifts that graph. There's evidence of this. It shifts the graph to being, it can put years on your life. And what really kind of got to me was, you'll get old. Everyone will get old. And you might live to 90 regardless of if you're active or not. But your blood oxygenation, if it's so low, you can't even go to the bathroom by yourself without help when you're in your 80s.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a difference in lifestyle, right? I mean, that's something I'd strive for,
Yeah.
to be self-sufficient in my 80s.
Yeah.
But
No,
anyway,
and those things will happen, as you said. And I think we'll touch upon it as well, but it's like there are things that you may physically not be able to do in your retirement years, whatever those years you may define them to be, or just in your latter years of your life.
let's touch on the very basic income you'll get in retirement.
Okay.
Yes, you will get CPP. I had this conversation with a client the other day thinking, CPP won't be around, right? Yes, it will be. CPP is funded. What is it, like $500 billion in that fund now? Anytime they add a benefit to the plan, they have to show how is more money going into it. So there was the example of why is the death benefit so terrible on CPP and how do we make that better so that the survivor maybe gets maybe continues the combined income of CPP. This is something I know the current government's promised or maybe suggested they might do at some point. But the reason they haven't done that is because in order for them to offer that, they have to actually increase the contributions to fund it. They can't just say, okay, now CPP is going to give a better death benefit. Now it's going to pay a little bit more. The way they did with old age security, where they increased the OAS benefit at age 75, government can do that just by voting for it because that's not funded. And that's why OAS is not sustainable in its current form. That might be an opinion, but I just look at the math. I think there's going to be a revolt from taxpayers that we're not going to be able to pay as much into it if they don't change.
Apparently, a resolution or a suggestion, was it last week, was passed. Not to get political, but I mean, I think it was just very much posturing and performative, right? But you can kind of get by 10%.
It's ridiculous.
Apparently,
it's making it even more unsustainable. But that's in order to vote the government out, right? And that's
again performative, right?
Yeah.
So I think to your point, though, CPP don't worry about it. It's going to be there. It's very well funded, well managed. OAS is a little bit more, in the power, or it's in the power of who might be in government. Again, unfunded, as you said. So that is more at risk of changing positively or negatively, or having much more of an effect to other people who are not receiving it. Yeah.
And it's good to plan. If you're planning your retirement income, don't plan to get OAS. It's nice if you'll get it, but you can plan that you're going to get CPP. CPP will make, especially those of us in our 40s and younger, because now we're contributing to the enhanced CPP, we're going to get a pretty decent income from CPP. And then you really just need to save a lot for your retirement. And when you're in your 40s, you got to have a good number of years of either money gone into a defined benefit plan, if you're one of those lucky people, or like, let's throw a number out there, $500,000 is a healthy amount. I think that's too high, or I'm saying, I'm throwing a high number out there that might seem out of reach for some people, but that's the level at which you're going to have a very, very comfortable retirement. Less, you just got to kind of think about that. Maybe you're going to have to work till 60, late 60s or whatever. Expect to spend less.
I think these are things that we want to be aware of in this decade that we're speaking of. But I think it's also a good talking point for older relatives or older colleagues or friends who may be very close to approaching that and suggesting, just wanted to make sure that you're aware of, of some of your options. So it may not affect you today immediately, but certainly there's going to be people around you that can benefit from awareness of, right? So,
I'm not saying, if you're 45 and you only have 200,000 saved up for retirement, I'm like, you better just give up. Like, well, you should stretch for a higher target. You should look at how much are you saving, have a retirement plan. And the challenge might be, if you see one of us and get a retirement plan done, we might say you need to save $3,000 a month or some ridiculous number. And that might not fit your budget so well, right?
Yeah.
And then, you're looking at how do I cut some spending back to make up the free cash flow to put more money into my RRSP or maybe my TFSA, if that's the way you're saving for retirement. And that's where I have a lot of clients in this age range where, they're looking at their monthly budget. Where can I find some money to put aside?
Yeah.
And some people think, okay, now I'm only gonna heat my house to 18 degrees now and in the winter.
I've said that before too. I've said that lots of times.
Yeah. Or no soccer for the kids, stuff like that. No, don't make those type of sacrifices. But I've found in talks with numerous clients, and there's, I hear this also from other advisors, there really are kind of 4 areas, and we talked about this in a podcast in the past. There's 4 areas where there's room to free up cash flow usually without taking too big of a sacrifice. Those are 4 areas where we just tend to, because of bad spending habits, spend too much. I know I do.
They're big ticket items, I think, is what you're going to say.
And so big line items. Yep.
Yeah. And a percentage change in a big line item ends up being a larger dollar figure.
Yeah, I guess.
So what are these tickets?
If you're looking at like, which are the line items where I can drill down to my budget and maybe see where can I save some money? One is food. And that's not just don't eat in restaurants so much and cut back on skip the dishes and whatnot, but also just your regular grocery purchases. When you're buying groceries, look at what are you spending money on? Where are you spending too much? Maybe, smaller quantities. If you're just going to buy this and that, and they're all going to go bad in the fridge because they're not being used quickly enough.
Yeah, the wastage.
Yeah, there's almost every family has places to cut back on the wastage there. The other big ticket item where we always want to keep up with the Joneses, car. I know I certainly didn't need to spend as much on the Audi I bought last year. If I wanted to cut back, I would have bought a Toyota, and then would have most of the same features, a little less fancy. But that's where we just have a tendency to spend too much money. We get offered these great loan rates, or just it's a car. We feel so emotionally we want to get that nice car. But it's again a place where if you plan better, you can spend less money there, not have a $900 a month car payment, or drain your savings buying an expensive car. Maybe also look at transits. If your job is in a place, I can take transit from Sherwood Park very easily. If I really needed to cut back, I'd A, have a much cheaper car, and B, take transit.
And you do sometimes. You do take it. You've mentioned as much.
I'd save $300 a month on parking.
Yeah.
And for some families, maybe it's buy the minivan instead of the fancy SUV. Nobody buys minivans anymore, and there
They're
aren't many
well, the
out there
ones who
anymore.
do, they're not cheap either, right, these days.
Well,
But
I think our parents' generation. Did your family have a minivan growing up?
no, we had small sedans, small cars,
Small
four
sedans,
seaters.
okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, minivans were not that expensive. I remember, they were a little bit more than the small
Oh
sedan, but much
man.
less than the expensive SUV. And every family seemed to have them. All my friends when I was growing up, their families had Dodge Caravans, Plymouth Voyagers. Look at my sister's family for when they've never had a minivan. It's always SUVs, and
Mm.
SUVs for some reason are quite a bit more expensive than the minivans. Um, but anyways, it's a bit of a tangent by a
Yeah.
minivan.
So food, spoilage, okay,
Yeah,
wastage. You've got
spending too much on cars.
vehicle, right? And then what else we have?
House, it's buying too
A
much
house.
house.
A
We
house.
often
Too
we
much
often do
house.
that.
Sacrilege, man.
Borrowing
This is like
borrowing to buy that renovation before we really need it. It's so easy to borrow against your home equity line of credit these days, and
yeah.
and build that
Rates are
debt, the
coming down,
fancy
man. I can
debt.
buy more house. I'm supposed to be buying
Yeah,
more
I guess.
house,
Yeah,
right?
and second houses, rent or buying rental properties and buying vacation properties, and this is just it doesn't affect most people, but it is an area where we do spend too much often. Where if you're gonna cut back, that's an area where maybe you want to sell that lake house if you're kind of stretching for cash.
It could be the recreational vehicle. Those are other things too that are largely borrowed against the purchase.
RVs, yeah,
And
people borrow a lot of money and they just appreciate right off the lot, just like any other vehicle.
So, I mean, these
I
are,
mean,
yeah, your ticket items.
there are cases where people do actually get a lot of value from that. They buy the RV, they go on a lot of family trips and everything.
Yep.
And I'm not saying don't do that, but oftentimes people are buying that RV and it's sitting in a lot somewhere most of the year when you could potentially just rent one. There's a website that does that, right? They're kind of like
There's quite a few. There's quite a few.
like Airbnb
Yeah.
for RVs, and you can find the nice RV that suits your needs.
Just like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can even just go to like, some of the, as you're driving on the highway, especially around Calgary, go towards the mountains, you see a lot of the Cruise Canadas and those sort of vehicles where you can kind of drive, and people will do that as part of their big Canada excursion, especially if you're from Europe or elsewhere, right? But yeah, these are all really
my cousin from Austria, her family, they've done that numerous times. They've seen more of Canada than I have. Going around in one of those Cruise Canada things.
Yeah. So
with all that said, the last area is entertainment, and that's a very obvious one. You can cut back on. What did Christy Freeland say? Cancel your Disney Plus during when everybody was struggling with costs going up. Obviously that's where you can find some reductions. So don't reduce your heats just to save money. Reduce your cable bill. Reduce your spending on whatever else and restaurants and whatnot. But with all that said, the next point I want to get to here is you do reach a point in life where you do need to spend money and enjoy time as a family. So, for example, okay, here's a case in point. I was at Disneyland a few weeks ago.
Just gonna say, after the conference you attended, you were in the region.
Conference, myself and a couple of other advisors, some guys that are, they're on Twitter. We went to Disneyland as a bunch of grown adults, mostly to ride. Biggest thing was Rise of the Resistance. As individuals, it cost us well over $200 a person to do this. And then, you see all these families at Disneyland. It was just packed, lots of families, young kids, and they must be spending a ton of money. And, the way it works at Disneyland nowadays, when I was a kid, I remember Dad paid like $100 to get the family into Disneyland. And I thought that was a lot. Nowadays you're looking at the adults costing about $200 each. Kids, I don't know what the kids are, probably also something
different, same, more than that. And then you got to buy the extra pass.
The Lightning Pass, and even the Lightning Pass alone is not enough. You got to buy the Genie Pass to get into some things, and they're making so much money. As bad as that sounds, that's an experience that I remember that when I was 8 years old, the first time. I don't remember when my parents took me to Disneyland when I was 2, but when I was 8, I remember that first time on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and we went to Epcot. I even liked Epcot back then. But that is going to put such permanent memories in your kids' minds, you need to do that. You need to spend that money sometimes if it's worth it, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you did it again at 43, right? So it's, yeah, I
Rise
think
and
that
resistance,
balance,
and you got to experience it.
we have been trained. And as much of all the, a lot of financial talk, a lot of planning talk is about saving for the future, and for the right reasons too, right?
And what for, right?
But
If you're not going to spend some money.
yeah, unfortunately, we brought about some anecdotes earlier about how sometimes you may not have actually be able to enjoy that and later on in your life, right? And so, um, at this stage in life, quite likely, or there's a very high potential possibility that you will have the ability to have some extra financial resources around, or something that you can offset fairly quickly should you need to, borrow at the first month or whatever to kind of pay for these things, right? But the option exists now, and you're at a place in your life where you it's a good thing to do. But if you're always a saver, right? Or you're like planning for the future and future, it's hard to change that mentality also to become a little bit of a spender. And I admit, I do tend to have, I'm still learning that in some ways, right? To be able to comfortably, freely, without guilt, spend some money. And I do it through, for others that
We
way.
talk about that sometimes people, when they retire, they can't make that switch from being spendthrift, saving to actually
Of
starting to spend their
course.
money. It's a real
Yeah.
challenge people have.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, you're right. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you might have to have, you were more frugal, you were saving. And if you're at a better income level now, spend the money. Try to learn how to spend more of your money. Maybe make it a thing like when you get a raise, put part of that raise into savings.
Yeah, of
But
course. Yeah.
also increase your spending. Let your lifestyle creep a little bit. It totally sounds irresponsible from a financial planning point of view, but financial planners, we're not saying that everybody should save as much as possible and live frugal lives all their life so they can save $1 million in their
Okay.
RSP and have this fancy retirement that they might not
It's,
get if they die at 73, right?
it's good to clear that up. You're not just wagging your finger at people, are you?
No, spend some money
Okay.
sometimes. It all depends on everyone's situation, but you have to learn that habit as well. Otherwise, there's no point in it all.
That is true. It's a means, right? It's not the end goal.
Yeah.
I hope not. We all hope not, right?
Yep. So yeah, finishing things up here. One other sort of area that I've included in the blog post for years now, this is just something that I've seen more with my clients in that 40s age range, is behavioral investing issues, rather. And this is stuff we've talked about in past episodes, right? That, people are susceptible to these biases, the loss aversion bias, that we feel a loss more deeply than we feel a gain. And as a result, we tend to do some dumb things with our money. What was it? Action bias. If we see the markets crash, we feel like we have to do something. We have to, whether you're a client of mine, you're calling up Marcus, and what do we do, Marcus? The markets are going down. And I'm usually telling that person to take a breath.
Yep.
And let's look at does your investment strategy still follow your plan, and so on and so on. And most likely we're doing absolutely nothing. And that's the right advice in most cases, is do nothing. And the herd instinct.
Recency bias, herd instinct. Yeah.
Bias as well. We're looking at the markets right now. We're pretty much close to all-time highs, and it's still companies like NVIDIA that have done so great. And let's put all money into that.
It's never going down, man.
It's
Like that 6 month chart only proves the fact that the next 60 years is just, of course.
There's an article recently about an investor who he's suing the company he was investing with. I won't name any names here, but
it's in the news. We can bring it up. I think we can bring this up. It's widely disseminated.
Yeah,
yes.
he borrowed a lot of money to buy Tesla stock, and his portfolio absolutely balloons. In the hundreds of millions?
400 million, I think, is what it ended up being. He started in the tens. Options.
Started at $88,000. He moved
options on
using
Tesla.
Options, went long Tesla, and made a ton of money, 400 something million, and he lost everything. And
that's why he's suing it, right?
Why did he think Tesla would keep going up? Because he was looking at recency. But you figured, people seem to think that the stock that went up 20% annually or whatever, what has NVIDIA done, like 50, 100% annually? That it's going to keep going up, and we need to buy that. And it's exactly the opposite usually. Usually that's the thing that's the riskiest, and we should probably look at what has not gone up as much.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating case study of responsibility and fiduciary responsibility or duty and
Mhm.
tax savings and tail potentially wagging the dog. I would love to chat about that particular situation subject at a later point. But yeah, recency and what have you, right? But we are all susceptible, and we will always be as humans susceptible to these behavioral the issues, biases, right? So what do you suppose, what do you suggest we do for the second half of our life?
Yeah. We just need to know what those biases are for one. And
Recognition of it, yeah?
the biggest one I find that starts to hit people in their 40s is that loss aversion because, we always say,
Yeah,
I'm investing in the markets. I can suffer losses because I'm trying to get higher potential gains. You do that risk questionnaire that says, I'm okay losing 33% of the markets are down. And when you're young and you've got a
yeah,
$50,000 portfolio, that 33% is what? $15,000. And you're like, I'm contributing that much a year anyways. It's no problem.
maybe. I mean, it's
Wait,
no small change for that age, but on a grand
yeah,
scheme of things, I understand. It's
it's
50,
not
yeah,
as
it's a
it's
percentage,
not as
yeah,
painful. Now, let's say you're in your 40s and you've been saving all these years and you've
yeah,
seen yourself make such great progress. You built up that portfolio to $500,000, and now you have a 30% loss. It's 15, wait,
150 grand.
$150,000, right?
That's a big meatball, spicy meatball there, as they say.
$150,000 is years of savings. And it's
Yeah,
like almost the value of your house. It's two cars or
yeah,
three or
yeah.
um, that really starts to feel painful. And even though you're at an age where you're still a good number of years from retirement and you should be in an aggressive investment portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
you, it's the first time you feel that really big pain from that loss. And that is where people tend to make mistakes. And I've seen it again and again with clients in their 40s, where
Yeah,
it's, panic during the great financial crisis. Sell everything, go to cash, stay in
yeah,
cash. I
yeah.
can't take these types of losses.
Well, because it
Stop.
was years of saving. It was years. I'm never getting a year back, right? And like, how
Yeah.
can I lose 20? I can't afford to lose 20, 30% of my holdings, of my savings, of my life, or, of life worth of savings because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Sure,
Yeah.
I can understand that concern.
And I almost
But
see
what you're
older
saying,
clients as less susceptible to that because they've been through it before,
the
or they're
irony,
just at a
yes.
or they're just at a lower risk level than the person in the force.
Yeah.
It's like in your 40s, you're still at a pretty high risk level in terms of how you're invested, and it may be the first time you're suffering a big decline. So something to just remember is there will be, if you're in your 40s, you're saving for retirement, probably 20 years away, 2 decades. Each decade usually has one big decline, like we just had during COVID, and before that in the great financial crisis in the 2000s.
The tech
You're going to see two
bubble,
more big declines. Two times when
boom.
your investment portfolio might go down by almost half. That's going to happen, and you
Tell
just
me
have
when.
to plan for that.
Tell me when's it going to
So
happen.
when's it going to happen? The chances are higher now than they were 3 years, 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago, the markets were down. Right now, the markets are at all-time highs. They've just had 2023 was a strong year. 2024 is
Uh-huh.
being a strong year. The chances are a bit higher. It'll be sooner. But we can't predict that. We just know it's going to happen at some point. Or we know a 20% decline, a smaller decline is going to happen probably twice every decade.
That's still $100,000 on that $500,000
It would
portfolio.
be, yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that
Still
$100,000.
large money.
Mm-hmm.
So it is an interesting point because, our my investment career as a professional is shorter than yours, but in that sense, like the last 5 years, I've seen a significant amount of change. That was sort of like my GFE, right? My GFC, the financial crisis, right? Whereas when I talked with some older clients, they were much more sanguine or subdued about it because they said they recognized, they remembered what happened in the 2008, 2009, 2010, and after the fact, it was felt terrible. But afterwards, it recovered, right? It
Mm-hmm.
passed, and they could even sometimes even go farther back and say, "Oh yeah, at the turn of the millennium, terrible too. It eventually passed as well." Right? The people who've had to be able to build that scar tissue are the ones, and I've had to build some scar tissue myself and help had to build it alongside with other younger clients who are experiencing not only a downturn, but a downturn with a significant dollar impact to this point. And so this is a baseline to say for the future, within the next decade, it will happen again at some point, and then it'll happen again multiple times in our lifetime, not just from the time to retirement, but then in those living years afterwards. Canadians are living, into the 80s now, and maybe even longer. So multi decades, this is going to happen right with regular fact, and I guess we just need to understand that and then build that resilience for the future. Right. And the best way to do it, as much as we read about it and hear about it and listen from others, is actually it's going through it yourself. Yeah. And you're pulling up a chart here.
Again, talking about that long-term investing, and I kind of geared this more towards younger investors just starting out.
Yeah.
The investment in question here is the Vanguard Growth ETF portfolio, which is not a recommendation. It's just an example. Each of the major ETF has a similar type of portfolio. This is a typical 80% stock, 20% bond portfolio, which is usually reasonably appropriate for people with more than 10 years of time horizon. Not if you have less years than that. So not if you can't take some of these declines, as you can kind of see on here. And I'm thinking back to these markets, and these were during your time. I think I first met you at a conference in 2018, right? And right after that conference in Toronto, we had that big decline in 2018, right? Remember that? we were talking about this. Every time Canaccord has a conference, the markets go down. Because before that, we had one in 2015.
There's your leading indicator.
Leading indicator. But and actually 2021, the markets went down right after that. Anyways, 2018, 20% decline in the markets. It did not look fun. It didn't feel fun leading up to Christmas. And right after Christmas, then things started going up again. And that's right here in the graph. This launch looks like nothing. You can hardly see that. We had a recovery.
It's a blip.
So this is the year 2019, great returns. And of course, 2020, COVID crash.
Yeah.
Recovery. 2022 was not good for protracted period here. And this was October 2023 when things finally started turning around. And that's where we are. So this is not a super long time horizon. This is only 5 years. September 2019 to September 2024. And that's not, I wouldn't even consider that a proper investment time horizon. You don't normally see recoveries that quick. But this was, if someone invested in this time period, they would have felt some pain, numerous points of pain. And if they simply stayed invested, they got through it. Yes. And as long as the money they invest in the markets is meant for long term, if you invested money that you needed in 3 years back here in 2019, not good. Or even if you needed it in a couple of years and then COVID hit and suddenly you needed money, you should have an emergency fund. We talked about that in the first one.
Lesson learned. Yes, absolutely.
But
let's just say that now going into the decades in the future, knowing that this is going to reoccur again at some point, as you said, right? We just need to build this resiliency and understand that, it's going to happen before, it'll happen again. The dollar value on your statement will fluctuate on maybe on a similar percentage level, but the absolute dollar value is going to be much higher. Recognize that, right?
And this will reoccur. And this is basically, each one of these graphs is looking at investing when the markets are at their all-time highs before they crashed. So that was 2018 before. This is 2020. Invested right in mid-February 2020, crash, recovery. This one is a less nice graph, and this is basically beginning of 2022. We had a longer decline, took longer to recover, but even still, you're not looking at the greatest return. Annualized, this is not as great, but it's still, all you need is time. That's what I made here as morals of the story. Always is a good time to buy equities for a long-term strategy. Don't invest short-term money in the markets, and don't panic sell. The cure to down markets is time. But anyways, that kind of comes back to the 40 something. And, if you were in that portfolio, let's say 2022, you were down 18%. This again is a diversified portfolio, not just U.S. equities. There's some bonds in there as well. But if you have 500,000 at the beginning of 2022, that's a big chunk of your portfolio. That's a lot of dollars right there, decline. But you simply waited it out and things ended up being okay. And this can happen again starting tomorrow or whenever this podcast aired.
Right? I got to go make a trade right now. So
Okay.
no.
with
Yeah,
that.
it's gonna. So I appreciate. Yeah, the reminder's good, right? And it's just recognition that history will rhyme, and behavior and learning from your mistakes. I would challenge you and myself and the listeners and the viewers as well, as that I think the paradigm of retirement is also slightly changing. What used to be Freedom 55 is not really Freedom 55. That's why the commercials aren't there anymore, right? And again, we're living longer as well, so the social nets around us have to adopt, which and adjust over time with the times, and I think our mentality as well needs to adjust as well. But even if you were to retire at 60, for example, that's still 20, 30, that's decades afterwards,
Mhm.
before the actuarial math says that you may not, you have a 50 chance of not being around. But still a lot of time. It's as much as I think we were gone through most of it, there's still so much ahead of us. And that potential for the savings and our personal health and our personal potential as well, I think is just don't be too worried if these numbers are shocking, in both positive or negative way, in the negative way, I should say, more so. But it's like we've got a lot of time, man. I think we're good. Well,
Yeah.
it'll grow. We'll be okay. Just start doing those push-ups.
So, anyways, we'll leave it with
Yeah.
be healthy and save more money.
Learn how to
Everything,
spend a bit
everything will
too.
be fine.
But yeah,
And quite frankly, it's crash.
recognize that we are being challenged again, even more so. And I think, if anything else, the time is the commodity. All right. But you'll start to get more of it. As I hope, as the kid, that's what they tell me as the kids get older. Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
without
Awesome.
running too much longer with this podcast,
Yeah.
again, there's an accompanying blog post if you want to look at some of these points we went over. And of course, if you're listening to this and want to watch the video and see the chart that I just showed here, it's at muhs.ca/FP40, FP40. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that, I guess.
Awesome. Wait till our 50s. Talk to you then.
All right.